Someone's asking what makes your Daza motor mounts so strong and what makes them better than the competition? Well,
This is a leftover
this
question.
was a leftover question, so we just happen
Pulled
to
out some
have
notes.
the mounts here. So we have several different lines of motor mount products. One is called our density line, and then we have a motorsport line. Um, because the Daza is such a powerful, heavily stressed application, we're not sure we'll probably do a density product for that. And so we've chosen to invest our time and energy in a line of motorsport mounts for the Daza. And these fit the TTRS and the RS3, the V.5 RS3. And these come in two different stiffnesses. There's a street sport and a track sport version. So each mount has two rubber bushings, and you kind of see these bolts here, but there's two rubber bushings that isolate to a degree the top piece, which bolts to the motor or transmission, from the bottom mounting piece, which bolts to the frame. And these are virtually indestructible. We have a lifetime warranty on them. Um, the fastest RS3 in the world, to my knowledge, still runs these. Many, 1,000 horsepower cars have run these with no issues or failures of any kind that we're aware of. And certainly, if they did, we would replace them, no questions asked. The fact of the matter is, you're just not going to break this thing.
Yeah, if that's if that
This is
has a
just
structural issue, then there's something
Yeah.
very very dramatic going on.
This is the motor mount. Similar setup. So there's two bushings, and again, we do a street sport and a track sport bushing. If you want to race your car, drag race it, you want to go as fast as you can, you don't care about NVH, then definitely get the track sport option. But if you want to daily drive this, know that we don't have a super livable daily driver option. Certainly nothing that's going to be as comfortable as the factory mount. However, it's livable. I've put a lot of miles on in a Daza with the street sport mounts, and I don't think they're that bad. You feel them at idle, and you will feel them like at one point in the RPM band where there's a resonance that comes and goes. Let's say it's like 3,200 RPM or something, and so you'll feel a little bit of vibration as you lead up to that and as you pass that. If you're sitting on the freeway cruising at that RPM, you're going to feel vibrations. But if you can get above or below that RPM, then there really isn't any. Um, so I know there's some other options on the market. I'm not going to, criticize those too much, but they don't look like they'll hold up. There's some issues with the design. And the other issue is with poly, it does deteriorate pretty quickly in an automotive environment. We use rubber bushings for everything.
You said it a number of times, but I think it needs to be made really clear. These are not solid mounts. That's something
No.
people keep. I've seen it referenced a number of times. These are absolutely have rubber isolation inside the mount. There is no metal to metal. These are not solid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm able to
Yeah, you can
flex it
deflect it,
slightly.
yeah. But,
You can
but
maybe
yeah,
see that move.
these bolts that go through are basically double shear bolts with isolators and travel limiters and whatnot inside. But there's no fixed mounting to the chassis. It is all isolated.
We would never release a solid motor mounts. We have an older one for the i5 that has Delrin, and it's pretty solid.
It's essentially a solid mount.
Yeah, but that's the only thing we've ever done like that. We have a broad line of motor mounts from, our density line mounts up to this stuff, but they all have rubber isolation. You want your drivetrain to be able to move. There has to be some compliance in there. If it's a race car and everything's solid mounted, you could probably get away with that, but things along the way will break, and you'll have to address that if everything's too solid mounted.
Can you explain a little why we don't make a motor mount that is less stiff?
The density. So, there's a couple of so Nick's question is, why isn't there a little bit softer version of this? There's an amount of movement that you have to limit on these to just functionally keep the motor constrained and the transmission constrained in a way that'll work in the chassis. If it gets too much lateral movement, the transmission will start banging into things. The engine, the intake specifically, will start hitting the airbox. So there's a confined amount of movement we have to limit these to. Where if you keep going softer and softer, you end up with essentially a stock mount, and now you've got a motor that's moving as much and bouncing around as much as it does on a stock configuration, which is kind of where the DAZ is a little unique with our lineup, where we have a density offering for the lower power cars, but when they're up to the 500-600 horsepower, then we're telling them you probably need to get into a motorsport level mount. The DAZ is there with a flash, so that's why we're kind of already into this with the DAZ.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact of the matter is the stock mounts are pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
you can abuse them, you can pound on them, and they're comfortable.
The motor will move around a lot, but it's constrained enough where where obviously will still function. We have that issue with some people banging. They'll launch hard enough, they'll actually bounce the motor into the front or back of the car, depending on the condition of the mounts. But
The bigger issue with the density mounts in this application is with all the drag racing that people do in these cars. The density mounts and the OEM style mounts, they're cast aluminum,
right.
and with the abuse that people dish out, the cast aluminum just doesn't hold up. So we've chosen to do this build construction.
Both stock and our density, because it's obviously the same construction we've had.
And the Street Sport is so relatively comfortable that I just decided, like, let's just rock the Street Sport. It's really, really not bad at all. And you've got some of these cars have many cars have 800 horsepower. There's quite a few over 1,000. And at what point how do you qualify that? Like, okay, well, guys, this mount's okay if you're 600 horsepower below, and if you limit all these interactions. But if the market really wants that, I mean, we'll certainly go back and consider it again. But the Street Sport are actually really nice. These mounts do soften up. Like, initially, they're much stiffer than after like a month. The rubber does settle and become softer, and then it stays there at that point. But we sell a ton of these. We've struggled to keep them in stock in the past. We've really ramped up our production on them. And again, from a customer service warranty issue, they've been flawless. Yeah, cool. If you guys have any more questions about these mounts or any of our other mounts, please let us know.
Yeah, and we can always if you need more info or really want to see the inner workings, we can tear them down and we'll have all spread out on all various components next week.
They're super simple. I mean, I think if you look on our website, you'll get an idea.
Yeah,
there's no magic here. It's just good engineering and it's an isolated product. So, like Nate said, there's the bushings that isolate in this plane, and then we have an additional rubber isolator, so any movement back and forth is taken up by this rubber bushing here. And I mean, simple product, but really well executed, and that's the idea.
Yeah, we've been running this design philosophy for a number of years now too. This isn't a new thing. I had it back on my A3 VR6 Turbo years and years ago. So.
Yeah.